God's challenge. Olokun was the great god of water. He lived deep down in the blue sea in a magical palace. He owned a mighty river that filled all the oceans of our planet Earth. The men and women of Nigeria loved Olokun and worshipped him as their favorite god. There was hardly any occasion when they did not think of him and thank him for all his mercies. They built him magnificent temples, decorated them with expensive materials and delicately carved figures. People had statues of Olokun in their houses and prayed and glorified the mighty god every day. All this worshipping made Olokun feel very important. So important, in fact, that he became quite big-headed.
I shouldn't just be the god of water.
Olokun began to think.
I should really be the chief god.
The thought niggled away at Olokun until one day he exploded at his chief server.
What can the chief god do for humans that I can't? I don't know.
The startled servant spluttered.
Exactly,
Roared the water god.
That's why I'm sending you to the chief god with a message. Go, tell him that I challenge him for his title of chief god.
The servant gulped.
Yes, my lord.
He squeaked nervously. He dashed away to the chief god's palace, panicking all the way. Surely the chief god would be furious at such a bold message? Why could his master not realize that the chief god ruled over the entire planet Earth and that he just ruled over the seas and oceans? When the servant was shown into the chief god's magnificent chamber, his teeth were chattering and his knees knocking with fear. He bowed low before the chief god's enormous glittering throne.
Your Majesty,
He stuttered.
your royal menace, I mean highness. Enough.
The chief god commanded.
I can read the thoughts of all creatures, and I'm fully aware of why you have been sent here.
The servant shut his eyes tightly and waited to be sent to the dungeons.
Go and tell your master that I accept his challenge.
The stunned servant could not believe his ears.
Of course, I'm far too busy to meet Olokun personally.
The chief god continued with a secret smile.
I will send my ambassador instead.
The servant scurried backwards out of the huge room, bowing all the way, and ran to his master with the news. At first, the water god wasn't pleased at all.
An ambassador? A messenger?
Olokun thundered.
I challenged the chief god, and he sends me a mere messenger?
The servant thought quickly.
Perhaps the chief god is afraid to face you himself, my lord.
He suggested.
You are right.
Olokun crowed.
I'll soon show this nobody of a messenger exactly what he's up against.
Olokun barked orders, and hundreds of servants sprang into action, dashing here and there and everywhere. By the time a fanfare announced the arrival of the chief god's messenger, Olokun's underwater palace sparkled and glittered. Coral tables were laid on the ocean floor with delicious food. Beautiful music rippled through every room, and the floors were littered with a million shells of all shapes, sizes, and colors. The hour had arrived. Everyone was assembled in the huge hall. Finally, the water god himself strode into the throne room. He was dressed splendidly, in amazing robes that swirled and billowed like the waves of the mighty oceans. The moment Olokun caught sight of the messenger, he stopped dead in his tracks. The messenger was wearing the same clothes as he was.
Will you excuse me for a minute?
Olokun muttered.
I really must change out of these old rags.
The water god hurried back to his dressing room, his face red with embarrassment. It wasn't long before Olokun was back. This time, he was wearing robes that clung around him as he walked and shimmered like sea mist. Yet, Olokun had no sooner laid eyes on the messenger that he turned and headed out again.
Do forgive me.
He shouted over his shoulder.
I have spotted a speck of dirt on my robes. Allow me to change.
Somehow the messenger's clothes again matched Olokun's outfit. When Olokun entered the throne room for the third time, everyone gasped. The water god was dressed in the very best clothes he owned. They were so rich and fine, he had never worn them before. Olokun had been saving them for when he became the new chief god. As he walked, the robes rippled and changed from the colors of sunrise to sunset to starry midnight. They rustled and swished with the secret songs of ancient sea creatures. No one had ever seen anything so beautiful. Imagine Olokun's horror when he saw that the messenger had changed his clothes too. Once again, they were both wearing exactly the same robes. It was at that time that Olokun realized that he was beaten. He bowed his head in shame.
Go back to the chief god,
He whispered.
give him my respects, and tell him that I have learnt my lesson. I cannot compete with the chief god's messenger. What will I compete with the chief god himself?
The water god never found out that the chief god's messenger was really a chameleon, a lizard that changes its colors to match its surroundings. Olokun had been tricked by nature itself.